The Book of Awesome Women by Becca Anderson. Isadora Duncan, Dancing for Her Life. Isadora Angela Duncan was an American pioneer dancer often called Mother of Modern Dance. She was born in San Francisco on a summer day in 1877. Her father was a banker, but soon after her birth, he lost his job and was humiliated publicly. The family became very poor, so she was after all brought up in the manner of fallen aristocracy. The parents were finally divorced by 1880, and her mother struggled to make ends meet as a piano instructor. Isadora found school stiffly and dropped out at 10 years old to be self-educated at the public library. She and her sister Elizabeth earned extra money by teaching dance to local children. Angela studied classical ballet, but soon discarded the rules in favor of her own freer interpretive dance. In 1896, she became part of Augustine Daly's theater and company in New York. Her public debut of this new style of dance was a total flop in New York City and Chicago, so she scrubbed together some savings and headed for Europe on board a cattle boat. In 1898, she moved to London, where she studied the sculptures of pagan Greece and integrated the sense of movement from these classical remnants into her dance practice. A grand dame of the British stage, Mrs. Patrick Campbell, became the young American's patron and set up private dance salons for Isadora at the homes of the most cultured crème de la crème. Soon, snooty breeds couldn't get enough of the barefoot and beautiful young nymph, dancing her heart out in a dryad costume that left very little guesswork as to Duncan's anatomy. Soon, she was packing theaters and concert halls all over the continent. In 1902, Loie Fuller, an American dancer and actress, invited her to a tour across Europe to introduce her innovative teaching. In 1905, she opened her first school of her dance philosophy in Grunewald, Germany, and in the same year she toured Russia as well. In 1914, she returned to the United States and established a school there as well, while in 1920 she returned to the Soviet Union after receiving an invitation to establish a school there as well. Isadora's great moments. In 1903, she gave a lecture in Berlin published as a pamphlet called The Dance of the Future. And in 1917, in San Francisco, she performed solo scenes from Iphigenia in Aulis to Gluck's composition to rave reviews. Duncan believed the dance should be based on the notion of free-spiritedness and not the rigidity of rules. Her dance was natural and uncontrived, with free-flowing costumes, barefoot and loose hair. She also challenged the prevailing traditions. Her behavior was often scandalous and unbecoming of a person of her talent. Isadora Duncan was not only the dance diva of her day, but a woman who dared to flout social convention, bearing children out of wedlock, to stage designer Gordon Gregg and Paris singer of the sewing machine dynasty. She was unconventional and flouted traditional rules of morality as well. She was bisexual and was taken in by revolution in Russia, as she was a supporter of communism. Her life was not all roses. Duncan lost her 2 babies and their nurse when their car rolled into the Seine and all 3 drowned. Duncan tried to sublimate her grief with work, opening dance schools around Europe and touring South America, Germany and France. In 1920, when she visited the Soviet Union again, she fell in undying love with Sergei Alexandrovich Yesenin, a respected poet half her age. The two married despite Duncan's abhorrence of the institution and were taken from Bolshevik spies as they traveled the globe. Upon being heckled mercilessly at a performance in Boston Symphony Hall, Isadora Duncan bid her homeland adieu forever. "Goodbye, America, I shall never see you again." She was as good as her word. The honeymooners scuttled back to Europe, where the relationship crashed against the rocks of Yesenin's insanity. He committed suicide in 1925, and Duncan lived the remainder of her life on the French Riviera, where another auto accident ended her life. One of her dramatic Greek-inspired scarves got tangled in the wheel of her car, and she was strangled. Though her life was sad and messy, Isadora Duncan's real triumph was her art. She changed the dance world forever, freeing from the form from Victorian constriction to allow more natural movement. Duncan believed in celebrating the sculptural beauty of the female body and that dance was a divine expression. Duncan is regarded by many to have been the chief pioneer of modern dance. She was a free spirit for whom to dance is to live. If my art is symbolic of any one thing, it is symbolic of the freedom of woman and her emancipation. Duncan also believed that children should learn by making mistakes and stated, "The finest inheritance you can give to a child is to allow it to make its own way, completely on its own feet." Although Isadora Duncan died at the age of 50 years old on a September 1927 in Nice in France, she will also live in our hearts, in our minds, and in our dance.